Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady. I think she makes an incredibly important point, and hopefully she will know and understand how seriously this government takes these issues. We've made a very ambitious manifesto commitment to halve violence against women and girls over 10 years. That is something that, as ministers in the Home Office with the Home Secretary and the Safeguarding Minister, we are working at pace to address. We take these matters very seriously, and she's absolutely right to identify the particular challenges that exist online. And the Safeguarding Minister will have more to say about this in due course.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to the Security Minister for his words today, and he's successfully exposed the reports about this leak as the nonsense that they are. But there are serious issues here, including around how we respond to the rising level of youth violence and extremism and the increasing availability of online material, which is fueling that obsession with violence and death. Can the Security Minister tell us how the intelligence services are approaching this challenge and what more the government can do to stop young people disappearing into this dangerous abyss?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Lady does raise a very important point, and the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary have both referred to this recently, including during their statements on the 21st of February. She's right. There have been a troubling rise in the number of cases involving young men, boys, teenagers who are being drawn into extremism. Now, as I said to the House earlier, this includes a range of different areas, both Islamist extremism, far-right extremism, but also there is a particularly concerning rise in those drawn into what's referred to as mixed and confused ideology, and those young men, boys, who have an obsession with violence. This is not a threat that is unique to the United Kingdom. This is a threat that is being experienced internationally, but I can give her an assurance that both the intelligence services and our law enforcement partners are working with government at pace, along with our international partners, to look at what more we can do in this particular area.
Sir Bernard.
Mr. Speaker, can I first echo the Minister's point that we should be grateful to those civil servants who are working night and day to protect us from terrorist threats. And I suppose we should also be grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman for denouncing the document that certainly emanated from his department without making any personal criticism of those civil servants. But doesn't that document demonstrate that there's a large body of opinion that has completely lost its way in terms of how we deal with extremism and terrorist threats? And could I urge him to encourage the department to return to what Prevent is really intended to achieve and not get distracted by all this political correctness, given that most of the country have no idea what a non-hate crime incident is. We need to return to proper language that people understand, or indeed the government itself is driving the disillusion and despair that people have about these matters.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very grateful, as I always am, to the Right Honourable Gentleman for his observations, and I'm grateful as well for the point that he made about civil servants. He talks about political correctness. I hope that he knows the Home Secretary and myself well, having served together in this House over many years, that fundamentally it has to be about the threat. And we will leave no stone unturned to ensure that we have the appropriate level of resource in the right place at the right time to ensure that the ever-evolving and complex nature of the threat that we face both in the United Kingdom but also abroad as well is appropriately addressed by our law enforcement agencies. I give him a categorical assurance that we will continue to work around the clock to make sure that we protect the public.
Mark Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the Security Minister for clarifying the timeline of when this report was commissioned. But of course, we should remember that since that report was commissioned, we've seen the brutal, sadistic murders in Southport and the riots that came after it. Clearly, we are living in a time of rising and worrying extremism, and that should concern us on all sides of this House. Therefore, does the Security Minister agree with me that those on all sides of this House should be working together to deal with extremism rather than playing political games?
Minister.
I think the honourable member does make a very important point, and I hope the House will know that it is always my default setting, if you want to put it in that way, to try and work collaboratively with members right across this House. I give the honourable member and I give the House an absolute assurance of the seriousness with which we take these particular matters. I think members will understand that it is right to commission civil servants to look very carefully at the profound nature of the threat that we face and bring forward policy suggestions and solutions to how we as a government are best placed to address them. That is what is happening, but this government will always do the right thing to ensure that we protect the public.
Mr. Speaker, I think we have to tread very carefully when we enter into this territory, and the leak of this report has already raised alarm bells with a number of different groups. It has also given the right another opportunity to spread division and further disinformation. So what reassurances can he give campaign groups, environmentalists and those that are taking up campaigns that they will not be included when he finally brings forward his plans in the future?
Minister.
Thank you. I'm happy to give the honourable gentleman assurance that this government will always approach these matters in a level-headed and consensual way. I have to say that it is the case that previous governments sought to use these particular issues as a political football. Well, it is the case that previous governments were on occasion motivated as much by a desire to score political points. And that will never be the approach of this government. We're only motivated by a desire to protect the public.
The Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to echo the concerns raised by my honourable member from Edinburgh East and Muscle Borough. Because in my own constituency just this weekend we had an incident in our community with young people and knives. And whilst I cannot comment on this particular incident, I am, Mr. Speaker, extremely concerned about the availability of knives, particularly to our young people. So, Mr. Speaker, does the Minister agree with me that the sale of knives, particularly online, is too easy? And, Mr. Speaker, can he tell me and my constituents what the government are doing to restrict this availability and the fear that goes into our communities?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government shares the honourable lady's concern about the availability of knives online. And that's why, as I said to another honourable member just a moment ago, just this weekend the Home Secretary has announced stricter age verification checks and a ban on doorstep drops to greater protect people from knife crime. We will do everything that we possibly can, working with online retailers and the police, to ensure that the availability of knives is very, very significantly reduced in order to protect the public.
Sir Desmond Swayne.
The repudiation of the contents is a step back from thought crime. The danger remains of 2 steps toward it. Isn't it outrageous when individuals are harassed by the police when they haven't broken the law?
Yeah. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the right honourable gentleman is right in the sense that, of course, the police should and will be guided by the law. He, as an experienced member, will, I am sure, have worked very closely with the police over many, many years. My experience of working closely with the police is that they make the right judgments for the right reasons. But where there are issues that require further attention, then, of course, the government will look at these matters.
John Slinger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It seems that advice to ministers on national security issues has been leaked to a former Tory special advisor, and as a result of that leak, the Security Minister has been summoned here to answer questions, even though the leak does not represent government policy, and the Minister has made clear that the advice has been rejected. Does he agree with me that this sets a dangerous precedent and may encourage more disgruntled individuals to commit politically motivated leaks, and that this shows that His Majesty's official opposition is sadly sinking into the mire of populism, which can only undermine our national security and indeed our democracy in the future?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, as I hope that I have made crystal clear, I am always happy to come to this House to debate and discuss matters relating to national security. I will do that whenever the House wishes me to do so. But on this particular occasion, and as I think I have been crystal clear, this is a leak about something which does not represent government policy.
Iqbal Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is no place for extremism in our society or country from anyone. Prevent unfairly associate certain ethnic minorities and religious groups with extremism. Also, the programme's vague definition of extremism has led to an inconsistent implementation with concerns about overreach. What steps is the government taking to address the discrimination and failings in the Prevent programme to make it impartial and effective to prevent extremism and violence from across all of society?
Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the honourable member is right to say that there is no place for extremism in this country. Of course, that is the case. But I have to say I don't agree with his characterisation of the Prevent programme. The Prevent programme consists of some extremely dedicated and hard-working public servants, but he will know that the Home Secretary has announced the appointment of an interim Prevent Commissioner, Lord Anderson, and Lord Anderson will be looking very closely at how the Prevent programme works and how it can be made to work more effectively in the future.
Mark Pritchard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When tackling extremism, whether violent or non-violent, is the Security Minister satisfied that the current division of labour between counter-terrorism policing and the security service is understood well enough by those two organisations and is delivering and working well?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm always very grateful to the right honourable member, and I know that he speaks with real experience and authority on these matters, and I think he raises an important and reasonable question. Yes, I am happy to give him that assurance. I work incredibly closely both with counter-terrorism police and with operational partners on a daily basis. Of course, we look at these things very closely and keep them under review, and if we think that we need to change the balance in any particular area, then we won't hesitate to do so.
Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the Security Minister thinks there's not two-tier policing in this country, then quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, he needs to get out more. Because this report actually states that anybody who calls out two-tier policing is a far-right extremist, and grooming rape gangs are an alleged problem. Does the Minister agree?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The point I was seeking to make earlier on, and I'm happy to reiterate to the honourable member, is about the importance that we on this side attach to supporting the police. We think that the police do an incredibly difficult job, and whilst he might think that I need to get out a bit more, well, perhaps the honourable member might like to consider spending a bit of time with police officers on the beat in his constituency, in his area. If he were to do so, I'm quite confident that he would see that they are exceptional people doing difficult work under difficult circumstances, and there is a real risk that by seeking to progress this narrative, it undermines the important work of the police.
Andrew Morrison, Doctor.
Speaker, thank you. It's good to see the Minister at the dispatch box to distance himself from the conclusions of a report commissioned by his department. But reports don't leak themselves. Why does he think whoever leaked this does not agree with the Minister that there's nothing to see here?
Minister.
Ultimately, that is, of course, a matter for the leaker. But as I have already said, it is standard procedure in circumstances such as this for the Cabinet Office to initiate a leak inquiry. I think that that would be the right course of action under these circumstances. So if I were the leaker, I wouldn't be too comfortable at the moment.
Jeremy Corbett.
Mr. Speaker, obviously in drawing up a policy, the Minister needs to consult with the representatives of all communities, particularly those that are suffering the worst attacks by the far right in Britain at the present time. Could he assure us that he will be meeting the Muslim Council of Britain and he will be meeting other Muslim organisations in drawing up this policy, and that the statements made by his office that there were no plans to change the non-cooperation with the MCB has now been brought to an end?
Minister.
I respond to the right honourable gentleman in this way, that he is right. That government has an absolute responsibility to consult with all communities. Of course, that is work that is shared across government, and that is why we work very closely with other government departments, not least the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government, who are progressing their own bits of work with regard to all of this. With regard to the specific point he made about liaison, there isn't a change to the government policy specifically with regard to that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Minister explain why the review appears to focus on the symptoms of extremism rather than the underlying root causes of extremism? And can he assure the House that this mindset is not directing policy in the Home Office?
Minister.
I can assure him that the mindset that directs policy in the Home Office is what the Home Secretary and I think is in our national interest. And the Home Secretary and I will use every tool, every lever at our disposal to make sure that we keep the public safe. That is what we get out of bed every morning to do, and that is what we will continue to do.
Jim Allister.
Thank you. I trust the Minister will agree that terrorism in all its forms is always deserving only of punishment and repudiation, and never of glorification, particularly by political leaders. Does the Minister therefore agree that it's beyond reprehensible that the First Minister of Northern Ireland, Michelle O'Neill, continues to attend IRA celebrations of the actions of IRA terrorists, no later than just before Christmas, when she laid a wreath and spoke at the commemoration for 3 IRA terrorists who blew themselves up with their own bomb? What message does that send on extremism to future generations?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hope that he will understand that I don't think in the context of this particular response it would be appropriate for me to delve into particular matters in Northern Ireland. But let me make a point of consensus that his remarks at the beginning of his question about there never being any excuse or any justification for terrorism is one around which we can all unite.
Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Security Minister recently told me that it remains government policy not to engage with the Muslim Council of Britain. Last week, the Minister for Social Security and Disability attended the MCB annual leadership dinner. Did that minister breach government policy, or is engagement with the MCB now tolerated after all?
Minister.
I'm grateful to the honourable member. He asked me a question previously at Home Office orals, specifically in the context of engagement by the Home Secretary and her ministers. In fact, the Shadow Home Secretary is kind of chuntering from a sedentary position. He literally showed me the Hansard transcript before this urgent question. So if the honourable gentleman will allow me, I'll respond to his question. He asked me previously about engagement with the Home Secretary and ministers. With regard to other ministers, clearly I can't from the dispatch box account for other ministers' activities, but I'm happy to look at the circumstances that he's raised. I'm happy to confirm to him that government policy has not changed, and if there are specific points that we need to come back to him with, I'm very happy to do so.
Dr. Fadden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Extreme misogyny associated with far-right ideology is a major factor in extremism and should be dealt with to counteract it. In order to keep the 1 in 3 women that are being killed in our country, in order to ensure that the horrendous killing of the Southport killers does not happen again, also for the Jake Davison who killed 5 in Plymouth and the 51 massacred in Christchurch, New Zealand. No one wants violence, ideological or political. Does the Minister agree with me that our obsession and focusing solely on Islamism has left repeated governments blindsided to real threats facing us from elsewhere?
Well, he's right to say that extreme misogyny is, or frankly, is a disgusting blight on our country, and that is why this government has made a manifesto commitment to halve the levels of violence against women and girls. It is an ambitious commitment that has not been made previously. As I said to the House earlier on, the Home Secretary and the Safeguarding Minister are working at pace to seek to address these kind of issues. It is a big priority for the government, and we intend to make good on the commitments that we have made.
Jim Sham.
Speaker, can I thank the Minister very much for his answers, and in particular I welcome the Minister's commitment to supporting the police, as he's said a few times. I do have grave concerns that the revival of the non-crime hate incidents will mean more work for our overstretched police forces and to get involved in a war of offensive words rather than the war against drugs, the war against extremism or the war against violence on women and children. So can the Minister indicate if the revival of these non-crime hate incidents will come with a substantial increase in police funding, and where will that come from? Thank you.
Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful, as I always am, to the honourable member, and very grateful for the support that I know that he's provided to the police over many years. Let me seek to reassure him, because the Home Secretary has been clear that a consistent and common sense approach must be taken with regard to non-crime hate incidents. The government has also been, again, crystal clear that our top priority for policing is delivering on our Safer Streets mission.
Yeah. Completes the question. We'll let the front benches change over. We now come to the next urgent question. Sean Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To ask the Secretary of State for Transport if she will make a statement on government policy on airport expansion.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know the issue of airport expansion is something that the honourable member feels passionately about, and I would like to make clear that the press stories that have generated this urgent question are speculative, and I cannot comment upon their content. But
no, they were equals.
But we do have in this country a world-class aviation sector in the UK, and the government is committed to securing the long-term future of the aviation sector in this country, and recognises the benefits of connectivity it creates between the UK and the rest of